All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for the DC Food Policy Council's training on DC budget for food programs. I know we're still getting folks trickle in as folks transition from office to home, perhaps, but I am going to get us started since we have a lot to cover. My name is Mameko Bullerman. I use she, her pronouns. I am a food policy analyst at DC Office of Planning, and I am excited today to tag team with Rachel Clark, who serves on the Food Policy Council. Rachel is the policy director at the Redstone Center for Prevention and Wellness at George Washington University, and she previously served on the DC Council as legislative counsel. So there's so much to learn from her, and I'm excited to tag team. And as folks come in, please feel free to say hello and introduce yourself in the chat. And if you're representing an organization, please feel free to put that as well so we know who is in the room. All right, we're gonna start with the land acknowledgement. Washington, D.C. and its surrounding areas sit on the ancestral land of Nacotchtank and Piscataway peoples. We want to recognize those indigenous peoples and their communities along with others across the country and to lend our voice to theirs to uplift their past, present, and future communities. Right, so we're officially in the budget season in the district, although a little bit of a delay start this year. Our goal today is to offer information and tips on how to engage in this critical decision-making process of how the district spends its money on food programs across the city. So we'll start with a quick overview of how DC budgets get created and finalized, and the role that residents can play in influencing the budget decisions. And then we're going to talk about ways you can share your thoughts throughout the budget process. And I'm going to highlight how some of the key food programs show up in the mayor's proposed budget for FY25, which was just released a week ago. And we'll open up the floor so folks can share any specific food or food adjacent budget items or priorities that they're tracking that they want to highlight for the group. So if you like, be prepared to share it towards the end. And then we'll save time at the end for questions, but feel free to drop your questions in that chat as they come up. And I am going to ask our amazing Emerson Fellow, Zara Edwards, to monitor the chat. And we'll be sharing the slides, and we are recording this training, and we will post that afterwards on our website. Before we dive in, I wanted to do some quick polls to see who is in the room, since folks are probably coming from different experiences and background with engaging in the district budget process. So Zara, if you can launch the polls, it'll take a couple minutes. Sarah, sorry, I'm not seeing the polls for some reason. Are you able to track and tell me what you see? Sorry for putting you on the spot. Or Rachel, whichever is able to do that.
I'm also happy to recap. We've got
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Caroline.
So it looks like we're getting pretty close. For a few other folks who haven't yet participated, you should see the poll on your screen. But we're pretty close to responses. So we have about 70% of people saying that they have never submitted testimony for a budget hearing in the past, with another 30% who have submitted testimony in the past and are excited to learn about what's in the FY25 budget for food. And I think actually if I end, oh yeah, we'll give people one more moment, I'll end it and you can all see the responses. Here we go. I'm gonna, let's see, the other responses, 75% of people are interested in giving input on equitable food access and nutrition programs, 60% on nutrition and health, and then about 40% on urban agriculture and reducing food waste. So a pretty wide spread across that. And our final numbers are 75% who have never submitted a testimony for a budget hearing in the past. So that is super exciting.
Caroline, well, you are in the right place then. I'm glad that you were able to join. And if make sure the poll is closed, and I'm going to pass it over to Rachel to talk about the budget process.
Thanks, Momiko. So I'm just going to go hopefully pretty briefly through the budget process and where we are right now. Put briefly, the budget process is when the mayor and ultimately the DC Council determine what will be funded in the district's government's budget for next year. Right now, we're actually, as you can see on this slide, nearing the end of a very long process that started last fall to determine the budget for FY 2025, which begins this October. As I said, last fall, the budget process began when individual agencies submitted their budget requests to the mayor. Between then and now, the mayor develops her comprehensive budget and submits that to the DC Council, which she did last week on April 3rd. And then over the month of April, the council will hold hearings on the budget, make revisions, and then finalize the budget in mid-June, as you can see on this schedule. So then on to the next slide to get into a little bit more detail. The way this part of the process works is the mayor's budget lays out the funding on an agency by agency basis. And when it's submitted to the council, it gets split up into individual agency budgets, which are referred to committees that have jurisdiction over the agency in question. So for example, DC Health's budget gets referred to the Committee on Health. Then this month, the committee will hold budget oversight hearings on each agency within their purview. And at these hearings, they'll hear both from public witnesses and from agency leadership, and we'll have the opportunity to ask the agency to explain what's going on in the proposed budget, why there might be changes, why not, and so on. And then following the hearing, the committee will determine whether to make any changes to the mayor's proposed budget based on what they've learned. And then at what's called a committee markup, they'll vote on a new version of the budget. And just to clarify something that's sometimes a little confusing is that the sort of package of agencies that are referred to a committee is the amount of funding that the committee has to work with. So the budget that the council, the budget that the council ultimately votes on either can move money around that's already there or could raise additional money through revenue raisers. For example, the council could actually propose a new tax or a new fee or something like that in its budget, but it can't just take money out of nowhere. So following the committee markups, all of the individual agency budgets will be consolidated into one comprehensive budget that's voted on by the full council twice. That's going to happen on May 29th and on June 12th. But I also want to note that a lot of changes will happen between those committee budgets and the first council vote. This will basically happen at the discretion of the council chair, who's Phil Mendelson. He'll have the whole budget basically in his committee, which is called the Committee of the Whole, and will move a lot of things around at that stage. So even after committees have voted on their budgets, there's still a lot of opportunity to give input and make changes or ask for changes. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how some of the agencies are divided up among committees, specifically highlighting food-related programs. So you can see DC Health is in the Committee on Health, and they their budget includes the budget for food access programs like Produce Plus and Joyful Markets for WIC, SNAP-Ed, and so on. The Department of Human Services falls under the Committee on Housing, and their budget includes SNAP, TANF, summer EBT. And you can see the rest of the programs and how they're divided up on this slide. Next slide, please. So I really want to make clear that public feedback is really important in this process. This is, for one, because the council works for you, right? You're their constituents and they want to try to make decisions based on what's important to their voters. But also, just from the practical standpoint, the budget is really complex and big, and council members and council staff really rely on advocates, community members, and other people who care about these programs to identify the needs in the budget, things that they might miss, because it's just so much to take in a very short amount of time. So the way that the public can weigh in is they can highlight the programs that they think are really important. So to make clear to a committee that this program is funded at the same level as last year, and it should stay that way because it's really important to the community. They can identify funding gaps or cuts that should be restored. So something was here last year, it's not here this year. Can you find out why? Is the agency still going to be able to provide the same level of service? And if not, you should put funding back in. Community members can ask for new or additional areas of investment. You could propose a new program, something that you think is missing from the budget. And particularly at a public hearing, public testimony can actually identify areas for the committee to ask the agency about. So often public witnesses will come first, and then the council members will ask the agency questions based on what they heard from the public. And it is the case that important budget changes are often made in response to public feedback. And one that when I was working at the council that I can provide as an example is the mayor's budget proposed to remove some additional reimbursements for school meals that were in the Healthy Students Amendment Act. And a number of advocates flagged that for the council and, wrote to their council members in the committee asking for it to be restored, and it ultimately was. And so things like that happen every year. Next slide. Is this you, Monica?
Yep. All right. Well, now that we learned why it's so important for you all to engage and share feedback to the council, let's talk about the how. First, you want to make sure you know which agency and which council committee oversees the budget item or the issue that you want to get feedback on. And you can use that chart a couple slides before that Rachel walked through, or we also have a chart on our website you can use if that's helpful. You can sign up to testify live at a budget oversight hearings for the agency that oversees the program. And if you're not able to attend the hearing live, you can submit a written or voicemail testimony. And you can contact committee staff and your council member anytime throughout the process. But earlier is better so that they have enough time to dig in and ask questions to the agency during the hearing or throughout before they mark up and make a vote on the final budget. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. If you're testifying live, you have to register online at the council's hearing management system 2 business days before the hearing. And Zara made an amazing tutorial video that's on our YouTube that walks through how to do that. So if you need to help navigate the website, I encourage you to watch that video. And you can testify either virtually or you can go to the Wilson building in person. And oftentimes when budget hearing covers multiple agencies, so they tend to run long, and you must be present either in person or in the Zoom room if you're testifying virtually when your name is called. You can check the hearing page the day of or the day before when it's published on the registration page on the council hearing management system to see how many folks have signed up and download an official witness list to see the order in which the names might be called. So you can gauge roughly when your turn might be to make sure you're ready to speak when your name is called. If you need language interpretation or ASL interpretation, make sure to request 5 business days before the hearing. You can do that when you're signing up, or you can contact your committee staff to arrange that. If you're testifying as an individual, you have about 3 minutes to speak. That's about 1 page single spaced. I know that's not long enough sometimes, but you have the option to upload a written testimony to go along with your live testimony. So you can, you can be to the point during your live testimony and add additional supportive information, references, stats that may support your recommendations. So I know some of the agencies already had hearings for public testimony portion, including today, DC Health, and yesterday was Public Works. Even if you miss the chance to testify live, you can still submit your written testimony, so it's not too late to weigh in. The tutorial video covers how to do that, how to upload your written testimony online if you need help with that. Some of the agencies that are going on, still waiting for the hearing is Department of Aging Community Living, going on the 22nd. Office of Planning, which is my agency that houses Food Policy Division, is on the 24th, and then so on. All the schedules are posted on our blog post. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read through, but you can look at the spreadsheet that we created for your ease. I think I'm going to pass it over to Rachel to share some tips.
Yeah, so when you're writing your testimony, I think the most important things to emphasize are why you're there, why you're connected to the topic, particularly if you have personal experience, if you work at an organization that is involved in a program that you're advocating for, or you're a community member who uses the services that you're testifying about, introduce your connection, and then use that experience to explain why you think a particular policy or program is important, and again, share that personal experience. And then to the extent possible, be clear about your specific asks and recommendations. Sometimes that's hard to do. You don't know how much something's going to cost, but if it's that you want funding to be maintained, say you want funding to be maintained for X program, and if you want funding to be restored, say that. And then I kind of skipped over when you prepare your testimony, make sure to greet the committee chairperson, committee members and staff, and then thank them when you're done. And also note that following testimony, the committee may ask follow-up questions, particularly if you're asking for something specific and they want more details. And if you don't know the answer, you can say that you'll get back to them. That's completely okay. And then I really want to emphasize, particularly because a lot of hearings have already passed, and this budget schedule is a little unusual in that it was delayed and then hearings happened right away, which isn't ideally how it should be done. That even though hearings have already happened, the opportunity has not passed to give input on the budget, both at the committee stage and, as I mentioned earlier, at this full council vote. So first, Momiko mentioned that you can submit written testimony generally for 2 weeks after a hearing. If you do submit written testimony using the hearing management system, I strongly recommend that you send an email to the committee in question to flag that you submitted that testimony, and even maybe provide a brief summary of what is in it in the email so that they know to go look for it. But then in addition to submitting written testimony, you can, just as with any other advocacy issue, you can call, email, or ask for a meeting with council offices throughout the process to share your concerns and recommendations. So again, as we talked about the agencies being split up into the committee, if you have a concern about a specific agency, you could reach out to the committee that oversees that agency and share your thoughts. I recommend that you, on the DC Council website, look for the committee director and send an email to the committee director and the committee chair, as well as anyone you might already know personally. Like if you know someone in that office works on a given issue, you can also send it to them. And then in addition to the committee, you can reach out to your council member, both your ward council member and the at-large council members to share your budget priorities. And in that case, you would include the member and then their legislative director, along with any staff that you know are working on a given issue. And I can say from personal experience, when I was working as a legislative staffer, that budget concerns came in that way all the time. In addition to hearings, if someone reached out who worked on a program and said, I'm concerned about X, that would get our attention. And then we would, do what we could do if we thought it was a problem as well. So definitely don't be shy about sharing your thoughts this way as well.
Great. Okay, well, so how are the food programs showing up in the mayor's proposed budget for FY25? My highlights are gonna focus on key food programming and food policy, but I want to acknowledge first about the intersectionality of issues that all aspects of the food system, and from food insecurity, urban agriculture to food jobs, all of these and the root causes of the issues and inequity that we're seeing within the district's food system intersect with the larger social issues like poverty, racial equity, affordable housing, or public safety, and so on. So I really encourage you all to also think about that and weigh in on those other aspects of the budget that can address the root causes of the hunger and inequitable food system. And it is a big budget. Many agencies interact with the food, and the food policy team, my colleagues and I spent all week since the release to scan the budget book, and with the support from the ex officio members on the Food Policy Council. But please feel free to flag in the chat if you're seeing different numbers, or if you're seeing numbers that you don't see in the chart that you think it's important. And like I said at the beginning, we will save some time for folks to come off mute and share information on specific priorities and budget items that I'm not going to cover. So with those caveats, let's dive in. I've broken up agencies by issue areas. So first up, locally funded programs for food access and nutrition. The great news is that DC Health programs, food access programs are maintaining the same funding level as FY24. So that includes Produce Plus, which is a farmers market nutrition, farmers market benefits, which just opened up this week for enrollment for this season. Healthy Corner stores, that's operated by DC Central Kitchen. Medically tailored delivered meals through Food and Friends, Joyful Food Markets that's administered by Martha's Table. And this means that these amazing programs that can continue to support residents' access to produce and healthy food at farmers market and corner stores and food is medicine services. So it's a true testament to all the hard work at DC Health Team and the partners that are providing these critical services. And I know some of you are here today, so I want to give a shout out. And similarly, Produce RX, administered by DC Greens, is maintaining the same funding level. Give SNAP a raise, which was enacted in 2023, and in the FY24 budget that we're currently on, the council funded temporarily increases to SNAP benefits from January 2024 to September of 2024. And for the proposal for FY25, it is not included at this point, and we'll see if the council can find funding to continue without a lapse. And I also want to note the FY24 supplemental budget, which is also going to get voted on, which will impact the current fiscal year. There is $1.6 million in local funds for summer EBT implementation, which is a new federal benefit program for families with students to buy groceries during the summer month. And we'll be able to share updates on that very, very soon. And okay, moving on. Department of Aging and Community Living received increased funding for community dining sites home delivered meals for seniors and Grocery Plus Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program that's supported by Capital Area Food Bank. I want to note that it's not in the chart, but no Senior Hungry Act and Senior Nutrition and Wellbeing Equity Amendment Act. So handful, those two bills around the senior food insecurity passed by the council haven't not being funded, and the mayor's proposal does not include funds for these bills. However, during the performance oversight hearings a couple months ago, the agency provided a lot of updates on those, all the work that they've been doing to address components of the bills to support senior food security, including the findings from the research work that the agency did with Lab at DC. So I encourage you all to read those updates. If you are curious, feel free to email us and I will be able to send you the links to those documents. Moving on to child nutrition. Healthy School Fund looks like it's maintaining the same funding level. I don't have the breakdowns of that, but the Healthy School Amendment Act funds things like additional reimbursement for school lunches and to encourage local procurement, nutrition education, and school garden grants, physical activity grants. And the great news is Healthy Food Curriculum Grant that supports Foodprint's hands-on nutrition education is maintaining the same level. I'm going to also note Universal School Meals Amendment Act, which was introduced by the council member Henderson. The council can still pass the legislation and include the funding for the Office of State Superintendent Education, which oversees the child nutrition program that's needed to implement universal free school meals. I believe in terms of physical impact on that bill, we're still waiting on the updated numbers, but roughly around 7 to 8 million is the last I heard. Speaking of which, DC Hunger Solutions and partners are holding a community conversation at Martha's Table on Monday next week. If anyone wants to spread the word about that event, visit DC Hunger Solutions to find out more about that. We will be there, so hope to see you there to have that talk with the families about why free school meals are important. Okay, moving on. This slide is a mixed bag. Some key programs in the Department of Energy and Environment are not showing up, including urban agriculture, infrastructure, and operation grants, which has supported 12 farmers in low food access areas to scale up their operation and production. Donation and reuse grant, which has supported organizations working on food recovery and food-based education and initiatives, is also doesn't seem to be showing up. And the good news here is that the hearing for the Department of Energy and Environment that oversees these programs is on April 29th. So there's plenty of time to still sign up and flag that to your council member at large, and a committee staff. Food Waste Innovation Grant is also not showing up in FY25, but looks like there is some funding for FY24 for another round. So stay tuned for more information on that from Department of Small and Local Business Development. On the upside, curbside composting pilot, which we heard a lot about in our last week's meeting, if you were there, is maintaining food funds to continue. So that is exciting. It looks like it's just enough to maintain the current operation. But we'll know more about that, what it would look like to continue. And doesn't technically fall into this, or I guess it does, but is the Office of Planning Food Policy Council also is maintaining operation funds at $25,000, which supports community engagement work and outreach work that we do, research projects to bring amazing folks like Sarah here, and bringing speakers to lift up more lived experiences and BIPOC voices in our work. So that is also a good news. And I believe this is the last slide I have. The food business support. Department of Small and Local Business Development administer a lot of grants that support small businesses, including food businesses and food entrepreneurs. Aspire to Entrepreneurship, which supports the small businesses led by returning citizens, looks like it's maintaining during grant pitch program, supports funding and technical assistance to entrepreneurs in Ward 7 and 8, I believe, received a little bit of increase at 600,000. Was not able to confirm robust retail grant, which I know have supported several of the local food businesses, but we will update the chart when we get updates on that. Moving on to the Deputy Mayor's Office of Economic Economic Planning and Development, DEMPED. Norris DC, which provides loans, technical assistance, and grants to small and locally owned food businesses in district, was funded in FY23, but was not included in FY24 nor the proposed budget. So do want to flag that. Food Access Fund, which has supported many grocers and restaurants, food businesses, primarily in Ward 7 and 8, was funded through the federal pandemic aid, the ARPA funds, and that has phased out because the federal funds have expired. So it's not. Although there has been some spillover from the carryover from the past years, it is not at this point continuing. And I was not able to confirm the amount for the locally made manufacturing grant or the neighborhood prosperity fund. If anyone from DEMPED, Deputy Mayor's Office is here, feel free to put that in the chat, but we'll see if we can get those before I post the slides on the website. So I know that was a lot, but I want to open up the floor here. If anyone wants to raise your hand or come off mute, if anyone wants to share budget priorities that I didn't get to cover, or you can put in a chat. I'm gonna sit in the silence for a minute to make sure that we're good to hear from folks. All right, that was 7 seconds. So I'm gonna move on, but feel free to put that in the chat or come off mute throughout. All right. Oh, Caroline.
Yes, I was gonna just share a couple of sort of reflections from what has come up in the chat. But I'm also happy to go after Jesse. Jesse, if you want to go first.
Hi, sure. Yes, hi everyone. I'm Jessie Silverman. I work for the Center for Science and Public Interest on institutional food procurement policy, and I've been involved with several local partners on advocating to improve the food environment in the DC Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections budget oversight hearing happened today. I was just testifying there like half an hour ago. But I did want to flag some budget concerns that CSPI and our partners have regarding Department of Corrections. So some of you may be familiar with the Fresh Starts Act, which Councilmember Pinto introduced last year with a number of provisions to improve food quality and expand culinary job training programs for incarcerated people. And that bill hasn't moved forward, but several provisions from it were incorporated into the Secure DC Omnibus Amendment Act that passed in March. And there was no funding to implement those provisions of Secure DC in the mayor's budget. So that's something we want folks to be aware of, and that we need to, ask the council to fund that part of the bill. So the number that the Department of Corrections said it would cost is $4 million, which we think is ridiculously inflated. We think we're asking for 1.5. Sorry, there's a siren going by my apartment. We're asking for 1.5 million for both the implementation of nutrition standards and expansion of the hospitality and culinary training program and for the next fiscal year. So we would love it if more groups and individuals, reached out to your council members about this. I'm happy to answer questions. I know I went through that quickly.
Great,
Hi,
thank
yes,
you.
I'm sorry, this is Yvette. What amount are you asking for again for that program?
1.5 million to implement Section 32 of the Secure DC Act.
Okay, and they said 4 million is what they were trying to put through?
No, I didn't explain that clearly. So in the fiscal impact statement for that part of Secure DC, which was I assume was entirely based on what the Department of Corrections reported that it would cost, was 4 million, and the mayor's budget included nothing for this section. We think that the DOC's estimate is inflated, and they were using that to as a to dissuade policymakers from moving forward with it. We think that a more appropriate number would be at 1.5 million.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Yvette, and thanks, Jesse, for sharing that perspective. I think the only sort of other context in terms of, and just to reiterate what you said, that it's not currently in the budget for either of those two pieces, which is to say the culinary training for folks who are currently incarcerated, nor those nutritional standards. What is in the 2025 budget for DOC is budgeting towards the construction of a new kitchen in the future DOC annex. And so that is just in terms of responses to anticipate and where you might be seeing budget is not for either of the two pieces that Jesse named, but that is the other piece that has come up in this context. So definitely, while a training kitchen is super important, that would be several years down the line. And so appreciate you raising these two pieces that could directly go towards implementing what's in Secure DC as was put forward in Fresh Starts. Any other questions about DOC? Otherwise, I'd love to share some of the other questions that came through in the chat. Carrie asked, and I just want to reiterate this because I know that not everybody can follow the chat while they're also looking at their Zoom. But Carrie asked a great question about whether the Office of Urban Ag is still funded. Was it just the grant that was cut or the whole office? Rachel, I don't know if you want to provide any more context.
Well, Caroline, you described it better than I did, that the office is funded in that the director and the program analysts that are currently there are still in the budget. But it's just the grants that they've been giving out has been defunded. And I think it's my understanding is the same, Caroline, that I don't think that they have any other budget in their office.
So again, I think that's while certainly looking at the things that have been cut is a really important part of this process, if there are other things that you are interested in testifying around, that are other programs that have either been piloted, such as the Garden Smart, the Food Smart homes, things like that. Of course, there are also things that you are welcome to mention. Lots of these have also been federal programs that have been piloted with USDA funds or other federal funds or philanthropic dollars that local dollars haven't funded, and that's not what's in our analysis. Our analysis is really looking at local funding that that has changed over the years, and so it doesn't include potential federal pilots, but you also can speak to those if those have benefited you, your organization, or your community. Jane, I'm happy to take your question, and then we'll pop into a couple other questions from the chat.
Okay, hi. My question relates to the composting pilot. When I first moved here, I don't know, 3 years ago, I felt like there was a lot coming out about the policy to reduce zero waste, essentially policy, and that composting had ambitious goals in DC. So are we kind of stuck in this? It's a good place, but the pilot phase, is it moving more towards, okay, this is law, everybody's got to compost, or where is that? Thank you, if anyone knows.
I'm happy to take that on. I think that that's a great question, Jane, and I do think that it's something I'll also make sure we drop in the chat, the updates, the zero waste plan, and that where the district is in terms of moving towards that plan. Certainly in Zero Waste DC, the district's new implementation of the zero waste plan, which is what was required in Sustainable DC, is to really move towards actually the plan for us getting to zero waste. And that does mean the district moves toward out past a pilot to full implementation of curbside composting. And I know that we've had some great conversations, including at last week's Food Policy Council meeting, about what that would look like and different perspectives on the need for that. To currently the curbside composting just includes single family, the pilot includes single family homes. Certainly if we move towards full composting in the district, we would need to be addressing multifamily homes, as well as businesses, as well as district agencies. And so I do think that while the curbside composting pilot is just around implementation of single family homes at a pilot level, and again, happy to direct folks to the recording from last week for a little bit more of what that, if the pilot were funded again, what that next round would look like. But it's a wonderful question to raise. And again, both at DPW's hearing, also DSLBD, which the Food Waste Innovation Grant specifically were to fund pilots of composting and interventions at a business level. And also want to flag that because food waste is not pulled out in the Department of General Services budget, it is harder to identify those numbers. But the Department of General Services is where composting at district agencies would be funded in the Department of General Services waste management budget. So it's notable that it is not pulled out in the DGS budget. And that means there's no guarantee of funding for composting pilots. And then to your point, Jane, the eventual expansion of that across DCPS, our public schools facilities, or other district government agencies, Department of Parks and Rec, of course, the schools being one of the major sites of food consumption and food waste in the district, amongst the district government. So there are other places that food waste shows up. And in the district budget, and that certainly I certainly think the district's goal is to move beyond a pilot, and I appreciate your question because that's not currently reflected in the budget.
Right, like the zero waste plan, including that as an intention, it won't happen unless there's additional funding allocated for that purpose in a future budget year. Something interesting that came up at DPW's hearing was DPW, which was yesterday, DPW did acknowledge that the compost program is diverting waste that the city would otherwise have to pay to tip. But right now under their contract for getting rid of refuse, they can't actually realize those savings because it's like kind of already locked in. So it would be interesting if the agency could kind of think that through over the next couple of years. How can we realize the savings from the trash contract and use some of that to expand the composting program? I can take the question in the chat from Michelle, who asked that I mentioned that the proposed budget may still change. In my experience, when money gets moved around, is it coming from another food program? As in, is it kind of a zero-sum game? So the budget definitely will change between now and the end. And I would say it is, I mean, I can't say that that's never happened, that funding has moved from one food program to another. But if a council member or committee really cares about investing in a food program, they probably care about all the food programs. They're not going to be taking from another one. And instead it would be, I mean, best case scenarios, they identify like something that they see as not like unnecessary or funding that's excessive and or realize cost savings or something like that. I will mention, and this is getting into a little bit technical, but another good strategy for getting a budget request funded is if you come in with an idea for where the money could come from, particularly if it's something that they haven't thought of before. So if you've identified funding that seems like it's not in a, you know, being used well, that can definitely be included in your ask. Any more questions? All right. Should we call it early?
Yeah.
Jane, do you have another question?
Oh, I do see a hand.
Sorry, one more. So just to be clear, the mayor is not proposing that quote additional SNAP?
Wonderful
there was-
question.
The uproar about the mayor not funding additional SNAP, it got funded and now it's zeroed out again. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that again?
Mamiko, do you mind going back to the Give SNAP a Raise slide? Because I think this is another great moment to also mention summer EBT. So in looking at the way that Give SNAP a Raise was funded, both the policy and then the funding allocated to it was a one-time funding. And so that $40 million was found at a specific time in the fiscal year, was identified and was allocated to Give SNAP a Raise. And so that was just allocated as a one-time bonus, a one-time a bonus amount of funding that was then distributed to SNAP recipients. So yes, it is not in the proposed FY25 budget, and it is not it is even with the funds that are currently available, is not proposed to be continuously offered to be able to truly give SNAP a raise to all recipients long term. You'll also see that because we were not aware of summer EBT at the beginning of fiscal year 24 nor fiscal year 23, those funds have not been published in terms of funds allocated to that summer EBT program, which we've spoken about prior Food Policy Council meetings, which will deliver a mix of federal funds and local. Will deliver federal funds to district families, but the administration is covered both by USDA and by the local district government. And so while we're anticipating that in the fiscal year 24 supplemental budget, which has not yet been released or voted on. Both that and fiscal year 25 are questions in terms of allocating that funding for summer EBT, for that summer benefit. So I hope that answered your question, Jane, regarding give SNAP a raise. I certainly think, again, given that DHS did already have their hearing, this is a great moment to be able to consider some of those other options that we gave around submitting written testimony. I also appreciate Camille's question. The Food Policy Council's budget has been $25,000 for the last 3 years. We are thrilled to have a budget that is more than zero, which is what it was for years past. And again, coming back to the question of an office being funded separate from its program budget. I appreciate the question. You might recall the celebration heading into fiscal year 24 that our team had when we were funded to have 2 full-time policy analysts as well as a full-time engagement specialist. That was cut so that our team is now a food policy director as well as 2 food policy analysts, but we do not have a full-time outreach specialist. And we have a mix of percentages of time from other people in the Office of Planning. So that certainly does limit in reality the engagement that our team is able to do, given the possibilities we had in mind of having a full-time outreach specialist. In terms of our programmatic budget, what I can say is that certainly we will do everything we can with the budget that we have, but given all of you have seen our Food Policy Council priorities, certainly $25,000 is not enough to achieve many of the things we could do if we had more funding. And you may all notice I'm in the situation right now, speaking to you all, that every agency is in their hearing. And I think that that's just a really important piece to be transparent about, that every agency, as agency staff, we are going to make do with what we have, and are in some ways in a tight spot of answering questions like yours about our own agencies. And that's one reason why it is so important for us as the food policy team and the Food Policy Council to lift up funding in other agencies where it is easier for us to reflect on that. So I want to acknowledge that I may or may not have exactly answered your question, Camille, but I certainly hope I've shared a little bit more about where our funding was, and we hope will be in the future. And I think that that's also a really important distinction in all of these cases. We really have focused this work and will continue to focus this analysis on the way the programs are funded. But regardless of program funding, if you don't have staff dedicated to those programs, it becomes really challenging. And those are not always allocated in a way that we can really analyze at our level from our team's perspective in terms of looking at each agency's budget and exactly how staff are allocated to different projects. But I do think that it is certainly something that is worth mentioning throughout, of making sure that the programs that you want to continue seeing also are continue to have program budgets and have the staff they really need to be able to implement those programs. Thanks for the question.
All right, I'm gonna give 7 more seconds to see if anyone else has any questions before we wrap up. Back to the last slide. All right, well, thanks, Jane. And thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any more questions, if you think about something, feel free to contact us at dcfoodpolicy@dc.gov. And we also, Caroline, the DC Food Policy Director, holds an office hour on Friday, first Friday of every month. So that would be, we already have April's, but it won't be too late to join May office hour. If you have any questions or if you want to talk it through with Caroline, I welcome you to register for the office hour. Yeah, well, thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.